I think I've done everything I wanted to do. I'll get out of the way, hand things off to Nabi.
Hello, everybody. As David has mentioned, my name is Nabi Supetran, and I'm a student at Antioch University, Seattle, and I'm the work study of the Messy Conversations. And today I have the honor to be in conversation with Karen Rey. She is a passionate storyteller, avid listener, and encourager. Through her mediums of teaching, writing, singing, hosting, and filmmaking, she desires to empower people to find the gold in each of their stories, turn them into message, and release them creatively. Karen is the author of the memoir, The Girl Who Died Today, founder of Story Life Film Productions and Workshops, and is currently finishing her graduate studies degree in Media of Arts major in film at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Thank you so much, Karen, for joining us today, and I'm so excited to continue on the conversation with you about third culture kids. And so, if you'd like to tell more about yourself, and also maybe give us a definition of what does third culture kids mean.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Nabi. It's good to be here. And I want to say thank you again to Messy Conversations for hosting this. And hello to everybody. Wow. Basically, I am a third culture kid, and I would say I did not purposely know this term or concept actually until just probably several years ago. And I think I just want to give a little backdrop on how I ended up kind of coming across the term, and at the same time, like, where this is all stemming from. And so that would be the background in which I can share with you all. But basically, yes, I was born in the Philippines. And then when I was about 2 years old, my family and I moved to the island of Saipan. It's part of the Northern Mariana Islands, and it's near Guam. And we moved there because my dad's also a pastor, and so we went there. And that's pretty much where I grew up all the way until high school. And it was only when I only got back to the Philippines for the university, or during my university days, and that was back in 2004. Yeah, so that was back in 2004. So that was quite a while ago. Yes, but basically, it was really growing up, of course, very multicultural, very multi-island. That's where I found New Nabi also in the first place. And so, we had a lot of different cultures, really grew up with so many different people. And the experience was just, and the upbringing as well. We had, I guess, if you could say, a very mixed upbringing of the West and the East, considering that it is at that time, it was a Commonwealth, but currently, of course, now it's a territory of the US. But basically, it was just really that kind of upbringing. So when I came back to the Philippines, I never questioned, of course, my identity as a Filipino. I mean, I grew up pretty much in a very Filipino home. I still ate the traditional Filipino food, and I couldn't really speak the language that well, but I could understand, how to speak and how to listen and everything like that. But I never really questioned that, because pretty much for me, it was just what it was. And also when it came to the experience of growing up with so many other different cultures, we were just pretty much feeling the same kind of vibe, I guess, in that sense, where it was just the normal part of being part of different communities and different parts of culture. And so I think it was really when I moved back to the Philippines that I really began to have the questions that arose on my own culture of really being Filipino, because that the return, I guess, which was the irony of it all, the return was pretty much when I started to realize, like, oh, like, growing up, I always thought I was Filipino, but when I came back, I realized, like, not that, I guess, in a sense, because of, yeah, my different upbringing, and obviously I couldn't really speak the language very fluently, not to mention, of course, the Philippines has so many different islands. So I actually moved to a different, not Manila at that time. And so they had a totally different language. So it was a different dialect that they used there. And I didn't know how to speak that one at all, or even understand. So I really had to learn that one through time. But basically, like when I came back and since then, I've been back since 2004. So yeah, it's already been almost another half of my life since then. I never really understood like what kind of the feeling of what I was really feeling at that time. I think there was a mixture of like, longing, like, okay, I'm here, I'm glad, but my family's not here for sure. They're still there. And at the same time, at that time, as I mentioned before, it was just a Commonwealth. So I didn't naturalize into a US citizenship at that time. Unless if you were born there, then you were after 1986. If you're born there after 1986, then you would become a US citizen and all that stuff. So on our end, like we had like this kind of, we had to go through eventually when it became a territory, like we really had to have a visa and all of these things, which I had also before. But basically, one of the things that was really the realization that at that time I was going about in life and everything like that, I realized that there was just some kind of like question about like, what does it really mean, to be Filipino, at least in my context? Because at that time, like, as I said, I was really questioning like, how come I don't feel like I'm Filipino enough? That's a common question, I guess, that a lot of third culture kids would ask, whether regardless of their ethnicity or anything like that. But those kinds of questions, and the question of like, where's home? Like, what does home really look like? What does belonging really look like? Those were kind of the questions that I would have because of the fact that I had a home here, and yes, I'm happy. Like it's been great. Like it's been good to be back. But at the same time, like, if you feel that family means home and you're not with family, what does that also look like? So that's pretty much like the background of how this whole thing kind of came about. And then the third culture kid concept, I actually don't quite remember how it came upon my mind, how it kind of really came upon me. But I just recalled, I think it was my sister, I think my older sister, and she just said, hey, there's this thing about this third culture kids. And then it basically was about, she just briefly described it. And it was just basically, I'm like, oh, someone who grew up somewhere else, maybe you were born somewhere and then you grew up like somewhere else. And she just started to explain like, it's really this feeling like, okay, like maybe that's the reason why you can't seem to know the rootlessness in some way, if that's how you kind of put it. The sense of rootlessness was always there. And then fast forward, so just to really fast forward a little bit more, basically what had happened was when I was finishing my now that I'm finishing my grad studies part in school, I was thinking about the question that the reason why it became a thesis for me in a sense. So in the end, this ended up becoming a thesis, ironically, because when I was when we were having the exam, or when we were having basically the comprehensive exam, two questions came up in the essay. And the second question was asking about regional films. So basically, they were asking about how can you highlight, the different regions and what kind of films were coming up in the regions. And then it suddenly dawned on me as I was, answering, like, if we're looking for representation of the different regions in the Philippines, like, what about the global Filipino? Like, it just hit me, like the realization, like, I was like, what did that look like? Because I didn't really grow up seeing that kind of representation in movies or in films. I've seen it in other, in other cultures, but for the Filipino who kind of grew up or experienced that sense of kind of like homelessness or rootlessness or questions of culture, I've never really seen that except for probably like one Filipino American movie, then that was back in 2000, the first one actually, 2000. And so that's when I realized like, oh, okay, so if we don't have this kind of representation, and the fact that there's so many, people, and especially like third culture Filipino kids, I guess, if that's how you put it, I realized like I would love to ask my own question and go through this process of kind of going deeper into what that looked like and understanding the whole Filipino identity as a whole, because basically all that to say as well, like there has also been that sense of loss in terms of identity, if that's how you put it. So yeah, so that's where I'm at now, and how this whole conversation, especially here with Messy Conversation, came about, because I was just really looking for people who had different experiences also when it came to that. And now I'm just looking forward to just really seeing more of how I can continue to connect it all. But yeah, that's a little background, Nabi, on my area and how third culture kids kind of came about in terms of mine. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing about who you are, your personal, journey, and also the connection and identity that you have found through learning about third culture kids. I'm an immigrant child myself and have also felt a similar type of experience. And to find a group that you can relate to, identify yourself with, it's a different feeling from the loss. You still carry that, but to name it really has an impact on me, and it seems like it has done for you. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank
I
you.
was curious, as you learn more and maybe identify yourself as third culture kids, what are the advantages that um, have noticed relates to being a third culture kid?
Yeah, so the first advantage that I would really say is adaptability. The need to adapt quickly and
Mhm.
to really be able to do things in a sense that you're able to relate, I guess, somehow. Um, and I think even to some degree, probably like empathize with certain situations or even people, especially those who may be coming in, like, for example, if there's foreigners here or if there's people who, who are staying for a while. And I'm just referring to at least like when in the context of when they feel foreign, and being able to sort of just have that sense of like empathizing with them and being able to really like have good like conversations. And actually just thinking about it, being a TCK or a third culture kid in that sense, it really is also, you find as you were mentioning earlier, you're able to find a sense of belongingness to people who have similar experiences. And so in that sense, that's probably why. But yeah, being able to adapt, being able to have, of course, a broader perspective of the world, especially depending on the TCK, their own experiences. Everyone has had multiple kinds, but being able to grow up in different cultures or experience different cultures around you really does give you a broader sense, gives you a sense of being able to know that there's a bigger picture out there versus just kind of like zoning in on what you think life looks like, and just realizing that there is, there's more ways to grow, there's more, I think that reality that you realize that people come from different walks of life, and you yourself just really also have that experience as well. And so, yeah, just being able to see that that's important and part of your growth as a person is really, I would say, some of the very, good things and benefits in a sense, and many others. But yeah, those are the top that come into my mind.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is like it really have helped you be more open to yourself, the world, and every perspective that, could exist. And so I
Yeah.
really appreciate you for reflecting that. What about the disadvantage of being a third culture kid?
Yeah, so the first one is probably like the sense of rootlessness, like where you feel like you can't really root down. And it's interesting because I didn't realize, like I said, I didn't even realize I was experiencing sort of like symptoms of that sense, even when I moved to the Philippines. You
Mhm.
know, even just in my own, as I said, I moved to a different island. It's called Iloilo. So it's a western part of the Philippines, Western Visayas. And even just staying in that one place, at least for, you know, several years, even my house, like I said, we don't have a house. So we didn't, I mean, I don't have a house to go back to. Technically, everything was rented, you know, and it was really like moving from one place to the other. Like even that in itself, like moving from one house to another, or, you know, after college, then you, of course, you do this. And
Mhm.
even when it came to my job, like my work, I realized that I was like, I don't know if I could really stay so long. And I mean, of course, I finish the contract, do what I got to do, you know, and totally be a part of that at that time. But I had a sense, I guess that kind of sense where, you know, like I need to keep moving, you know, there needs to keep be movement, and I need to experience something new, do something different. And also just this, as a general whole, I always had like, I would tell some friends, you know, I've always had a sense where my one foot is here in the Philippines, but my other foot is like, I'm ready to go somewhere else, you know, at that, you know, at that time, like during the time that I didn't fully realize the emotional, you know, and mental state of what I was really feeling at that time. And I didn't, as I said, it was only as I began to really study this concept and get into, you know, began to understand it just a little bit more, I began to identify, okay, now it makes sense, you know, that kind of like sort of rootless feeling where you sort of feel fear rooting down because you're just kind of used to the constant movement and change of life. And even like I said, even in Saipan, that's such a transitional island. Like even
Mhm.
people who live there are so transient, you know. And so you get used to having your friends go. You get used to realizing that friendships don't get to. I mean, in terms of proximity, you don't get to be with them that long, you know. And the second thing that I would say was really kind of just that disadvantage was just really yeah, being able to just know like, okay, where is you know, what is that grief? I think in a sense I didn't even know it was grief. Like in a sense, like like I said, like it was only like years later that I began to recognize like, okay, I could grieve this sense of loss, you know, the sense of what was, or this the almost nostalgic period in my life. And I'm also saying this particularly because after I moved here, I also had a lot of crazy, you know, life experiences too, that led to a lot of pain and a lot of issues that I realized part of my healing process had to really also deal with that acknowledging, okay, there's that sense of grief or something like that, even when
Mhm.
it comes to loss. And so yeah, so I guess those are the two main things that I would like to highlight, at least in terms of, yeah, disadvantages.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, when as you were talking, what really struck me was how you mentioned how, you know, it is a transition and comes with transition or you like you mentioned earlier, advantages, but at the same time, there's a lot of grief because you're kind of moving forward from what you're used to and kind of having to jump on to the next thing. And to have to do that often is a lot. It's
Yep.
a huge reality to kind of face.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually
Yeah.
for third culture kids and many others who may not identify with it, but have experienced it in their way, in their own ways. So
Right.
yeah, you mentioned about relationships, and so I was curious about how do third culture kids form relationships and then maintain them, or maybe even deal with the loss as well.
Yeah. So, as I said, like I growing up, you know, in a very multicultural setup, we were each other's, I guess, you know, we were all able to find that sense of belonging because we were all coming from different cultures. So we're like, yay, all of us, we understand that, you know. So I think yeah, so growing up, I think it wasn't really highlighted. Like friends are friends, like people that, you make friends, you connect, I think the highlight really was moving back for me, and the sudden fear of the fact that I had to let people know right away. Like I was a type. So there's different kinds of third cultures. I mean, like in terms of how they would respond, I guess. So to some, maybe they would just kind of like hide back, wait, for people to approach, or try to just be as, as maybe like what they would say, like try to be like a wallflower, I guess. It depends. Like I said, it really depends. Then of course there's those that have to just really like straight up, hey, I'm a little bit different right now, So I was that type in a sense. And it came because of language, because as I was entering the university, of course, everything was like new in a sense. Like I've been back to the Philippines for a couple of months for vacation, but to really like return was like another thing. And so I kind of just approached people first and foremost. Like I just was pretty much that type. Like if I needed to know something, like as I was sitting in class and like the class was just starting and I didn't know anyone, but I would rather not have them talk to me first and then find out that I couldn't understand what they're saying versus, so I would just be like, okay, let me be the first one to say something like, hey, I'm Karen. I don't really speak the language right now, so please don't talk to me in, in the dialect right now. And so right away, right off the bat, people already kind of knew that, okay. And interestingly enough, like I said, I grew up knowing how to understand Tagalog and everything. But like I said, I went to a different island that had a different dialect. So they would either prefer only to speak the dialect or English. So they didn't even want to speak Tagalog as well. So there's a whole other level of interesting things there. So I was pretty much that type to just really be the one to make them move. And I felt like I didn't want people to be uncomfortable. I think that was pretty much just what it was also. Like I didn't want to be the one that, and that's normally the tendency, here at least, like if they're, oh, like you're speaking English, and then, they do all the jokes like nosebleed or, all these things, and so there's just that thing where I just didn't want people to feel like I wasn't really, approachable. I mean, people still can be intimidated or whatever, but like, I guess in a sense, from my experience, like I tried to take the extra step forward and just let people know, like, you don't have to be uncomfortable. And yes, I'm a little uncomfortable. Like I'm the one who's pretty uncomfortable. And I had to get used to the fact that there's side jokes or, but I had to learn not to take it like, I understood, I mean, I got it. So I was just like, okay. And from that point on, like, I felt like till today, I still have some good connections with people that I first knew in college, and of course, I wouldn't say like they're all like my close friends or something, but every time I had to move, especially when I moved here to Manila, that was another thing as well, and a different culture too. And so, I pretty much just, yeah, had that sense where, okay, I want to be, if ever, I'll try to initiate. Not all the time. There's definitely people who have approached and have done their own thing, and have been really kind and whatever. But for the most part, if I find myself sort of like in a new space and I have to sort of like, mingle, then yeah, I easily can share like, hey, I come from a little bit of a different experience, but yeah, I'm here. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's like there's so many layers. It can't just be, like it's this way or that. And I'm interested to hear more about the types. Is there more than you have described? The type of how they
How they relate, adjust. Yeah, so that one, yeah, those are the two main one. Like I guess in a sense, like either you try to adapt. I mean, like I said, adaptability is what it is. So there's some that would really kind of have that sense where you would try your best to really become what other people were probably expecting of you to be, you know, like to try to hide that aspect, which probably they're not even aware of. Like, even for myself, like I would still find myself like, you know, at times, like I'd rather not talk right now because I don't want to be called out, you know, I don't want to be called out like different or something, you know, so, you know, but but then there's those, like, of course, if it depends on the situation as well. So if
Right.
you're really forced to talk, or if you're forced to be in a situation where you really have to do something, then there's that. But even if you do let people know, there's people who would definitely try, like, for example, me, as much as I wanted to really speak fluently, like the dialect, or even what do you call it, or even Tagalog, for both different experiences, I could start to really understand, but I think I would still say like my fluency in terms of speaking is still, like, even till today, is still not like 100% like fluent, you know. And unlike my sister, you know, my older sister, she has same experience, same background, of course, but her work leaned more towards social work. I was in education. I was an English teacher, so probably that's why I just was like forcing myself, like, I'm gonna still speak English. But you know, but my sister, she was like a social worker, so she, on her experience, on her end, like she really just tried to adapt as much as possible to speak as fluent as she can. And in her experience, when she talks about it, she realized also later that, oh, I didn't realize, like, I was also trying to really not be as called out, you know, as you know, as it was. Because there's just, I guess there's just that feeling when you're called out where you have to explain, like, you know, and sometimes you just feel like, I don't know if I have the energy to really like explain this whole thing, you know. But I realized that there's also the beauty in that too. So, you know, I guess it just depends, but for the most part, yeah, we tend to process things a little differently and choose like how we're gonna to do that. So
Mhm.
those are the two main types, really. Like, it's either you're really like out there, like I'm different, or you try your best to be sort of like a chameleon,
Right.
in many ways, which works. Like, actually, sometimes you do both. Like, you know, like I said, again, it's really the situation. So.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I definitely relate to that as well. Kind of as you were describing, it's that feeling of like, oh, I just want to blend in, you know. And just a little bit of background about myself. In my experience here, you know, it's I'm not really the type to speak up and facilitate, but we come into our own journeys and how we want to integrate ourselves, and that's one of my ways of integrating myself, being part of conversations, especially in here in Messy Conversation. And I'm glad to have this conversation with you. And thank you for sharing that. We're hit at the 30-minute mark, and so we're going to open the conversation to the audience. And I see here that Asa has a question. Asa, would you like to ask that question, or I could read it?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure I'm asking exactly right, but I was curious about the kind of feelings or how you deal with the kind of larger political histories of the two cultures, and like with American um, occupation of the Philippines, and that whole history, and kind of seeing uh, somewhat American identity with the Philippine identity. Like, how do you sort that out?
Yeah, wow. Thanks for that question. I think I've only really processed this more because of my paper that I'm currently working on. So I would just, you know, just off the premise, like I'm still, you know, in that place of just kind of still really processing that more. But I realized, I guess, I think for me, yeah, I think the feeling that I realized, like as I was realizing, as I was researching, you know, as I was researching more about the connection of the Philippines and America, obviously it's a very big connection, and it is, and it's very interesting to me because I actually realized that the Filipinos as a whole, or the Philippines as a whole, is very similar to TCK or cross-cultural kids. I'm sorry, I just want to add that a little bit, that aspect, cross-cultural, because TCK, sometimes the concept is quite limited. So people feel like maybe it's kind of just geared towards people who keep moving around from different places. But like Nabi said, she's like an immigrant kid or something. So the whole place of being an immigrant, that also has a different, that's still a TCK, but they wanted to broaden the concept. So they kind of called it more of like a cross-cultural kid and stuff like that. But yeah, with that kind of reality, like I realized that the whole Philippines, because of the colonialism and the impact of American society, you know, I guess let me start first with growing up in Saipan, as a territory, as a commonwealth. Like I said, for me, the feeling, it actually, growing up, I had good feelings. Like it was really like, you know, like, I mean, I had a very American education. Like all my teachers actually were at where I grew up, for my elementary to my junior high. They were like all Americans. They were all there. But I guess because of my classmates who were all mixed, I felt like I guess you could just say like that feeling of like, oh, okay, I have both good, you know, two good worlds, you know what I mean? Like experiencing that and what that looked like. And I guess because we were all in that, you know, one island where we all literally were from different places, it just helped us, I think, feel that sense of, you know, belongingness. Now here in the Philippines, of course, like it hasn't, as much as a lot of people have been talking about the conversation of like decolonizing our minds, or you know, the whole thing about like the impact, we still feel so much of American culture and impact, you know, here, regardless of how much, you know, we want to feel like that sense of like what is really the true Filipino identity. So that, I think that sense of like loss in terms of the Philippines, because, you know, prior to the Americans, there was of course the Spanish, and that was like really long. And so, you know, there was just I think so much of that. But the interesting thing, which I found out just recently, was that nationalism, or like the Filipino nationalism, was really birthed a lot during the time of the American period, you know, because of the fact that there was just that need, I guess, to really find that sense of identity for the Filipinos. So I think like right now, like in terms of like the feeling, I feel like I'm able to understand maybe the reality that maybe I'm not as different. Okay, so because like I said, like I was coming from that place where I felt quite different, you know, from the locals, those who grew up, you know, in the Philippines or something. But I just kind of, I mean, of course, people here in the locality, they don't really think so much about, oh, what's Filipino culture or anything. I guess that's the only difference. But, you know, for the most part, like that sense of like searching for, oh yeah, Filipino, you know, Filipino identity and the connection to American, you know, relationships, and even till today, the fact that English is still, you know, the main language aside from, you know, Tagalog or something. But still, like even as I mentioned, even in the different regions, they would rather speak either English or, you know, their dialect, and not even Filipino, Tagalog. So just the fact that that in itself has that also, you know, mix there, has really been something. So I guess like the feeling right now for me has really, the process has really just been recognizing that as a whole, as a Filipino as a whole, is really in that, has really been in that space as well. And I think it helps me be able to know that, okay, I want people to feel or recognize like we're not as different as we thought we were, you know, and even like the whole discourse between Filipino Americans and the local Filipinos. I mean, that's a whole another layer to it as well. So you know, what makes Filipino, you know, like all these things. And so there's really that reality that I hope that through my paper and through the things that I'm doing currently right now, I hope to bridge the gap. I guess that's at the end of the day, that's pretty much what I'm hoping to accomplish, is to somehow bridge the gap and recognize that, yeah, we're really not as different in many ways. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. All right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Definitely, there's a lot of layers, and
Yeah.
you kind of said that beautifully. Thank you. I see that Jen has a question. Jen, would you like to ask the question out loud, or I could also read it? I don't know if I'm able to see you.
Yeah, I can say it. First of all,
you.
thank you both for sharing what you have so far. And a question I had was just if you could go back in time, what would you have, wish you could have told yourself when feeling this lack of a sense of belonging?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. So I think if I could go back through time, I guess what I would tell my younger self is not to be afraid of being different or of really having different experiences and not having to feel like you need to, you know, how would you say it? Like, I guess in a sense, like feel like you're coming from a place of lack there. Maybe that's a better way. Like, you know how sometimes when you feel like, oh, because I'm experiencing this sense of not really belonging or something, like sometimes the tendency is subtly, maybe we don't even realize it, like sometimes we kind of hold back to really fully engage in our present, because I think like one of the things that I've realized is, there's, like I said before, because one foot was here and my other foot is ready to go somewhere else. I think like for many years, although I tried my best, of course, to engage presently wherever I was, but I always felt like I was also living in a mixture of, oh, but this is what it was before, and this is what I'm still envisioning for the future right now. And so, and so you can't sometimes, in many ways, like I said, I guess goes back to rooting. And so I think like realizing that there's something to offer and recognizing that your experiences and your background, all the things that have made you who you are today actually really makes a difference and can really contribute to wherever you're at. So, I think like coming to this place now, I believe like that's pretty much why I feel like I'm moving in this direction as I'm currently doing, because I feel like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to hold back. I'm not going to let this limit me there. I think that's another word like to use, like not to allow like the feeling of when you're not feeling as belonged, and sometimes, it's not so much because other people are saying like you don't belong or something, but I think it's just that inner place where because you've had such a different experience, you really feel like, is it possible to really like, have a voice or contribute to this kind of thing? But yeah, now I realize like I am what I am, and I would tell my younger self like just be, just use that, use it for the advantage of good and being able to contribute to what you can in your current, space. I hope I answer that. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much for answering that. I see that Sarah Beth has mentioned something here. Did you want to talk more about it, Sarah Beth?
Snobby, I found a site by an artist, and there's some beautiful artwork there, and it's tied to this experience that you so beautifully described, Karen. And I think about the comment that you made earlier about being or feeling this grief, and that maybe that grief often is mobilized in a way to move with you, and thinking about the relationship between when we stay someplace for a while, or we feel that need that you described to find something new and experience something new, and how it's kind of a both and experience from what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I wonder about the sense of of being able to talk about this in your own family or in your own community. And I heard you were a PK too, so
Yeah.
I'm imagining you have a lot of experience with that, but I don't know that everyone has those social connections or those ways of sharing that. So thank you for bringing that to mind.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I see here that Sandra had typed something. Did you want to talk more about it, Sandra? I could also read it out loud.
You can read it out loud. It's just you're sharing so many pearls of wisdom, Karen. I just want to share my appreciation out loud with what you're sharing and showing up today with it's really appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra. Sandra said, I love that quote from the article that Sarah Beth just shared. That is so beautifully related to what you are beautifully describing, Karen. Third culture kids are such a global people. Kim says they serve as a middle people between cultures. They're the bridge, and once they figure that out, they will realize it is something they can use for good. Yeah,
I love that.
thank you for
I
highlighting
love
it.
that. I'll probably like to take this link also and read through that. Thank you also for sending the link as well and giving all that gold too. Yeah, it's been such a healing journey for me. I mean, even as I'm also doing my paper right now, I think, yeah, just being able to have that space where, okay, wow, I can understand myself also better. I can also understand like where this is coming from, and so that reality of just, yeah, being that bridge. And I like how they said it there. Once they figure that out, you know, that's something that they can use for good. So yeah, thank you.
That's true. I really love that. Yeah, once you kind of get to know yourself, you're headed to that direction where you're meant to be. And so
Right.
love that. I see that David Tripp has raised his hand. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I just also want to thank you for the conversation so far. And so many of the things that you are touching on remind me of so many other things. Like I was a military brat, so we would move every year and a half, sometimes overseas, sometimes it's not. And so there's some similarities there. And then I'm thinking about the world today, this more postmodern world. We talk about digital nomads and how they live their lives, often with kids in tow. And then refugees, climate refugees, political refugees, just so many people in similar kinds of, not the same, but similar kinds of circumstances. And it makes me think about a couple of philosophers, Levinas and Lingus, and both of whom talk about nomad ethics and this and that at the heart of their discussion about nomad ethics is the welcoming of the stranger. That nomadic people, that's just a fundamental ethical principle, is the welcoming of the stranger. And I wonder if that fits at all with your experience with third culture, fourth culture kids.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. And actually, when you're talking just even about the different people, like being a military brat, refugees, actually that all, yeah, they've also tackled that in the concept of TCK and cross-cultural kids. So definitely that very, very relatable, very relatable. So I love that though, about the whole nomad and welcoming of strangers. I believe, yes, I think that would attest to just that reality. I think maybe in some way or another, it would look like the reality that, oh, this person is new, or for example, they've come here, they need, they need some guidance, just, I mean, not even like major guidance, but like, oh, how do you get around, or how do you do life here, or anything like that. I think that's the part where it would definitely be relatable. in terms of just really recognizing that, oh, they also really need to have people who can help them adjust or help them in their journey, or I guess in their sojourn, since they do move from place to place, they do move around. And I've come across several people who have come here, foreigners, different people who have had experiences in which, if they are not able to, I guess, find someone to kind of relate to or attach to, or somehow have a helping hand or something in any way, it's really challenging. It's really hard. It's been really hard for them. And so I realized like the importance of recognizing that, okay, if I can kind of relate to that experience, like I have to also, be that extension as well in some way, in the capacity that I'm able to do, And so, yeah, so I would say yes. I don't know about for others, like, I guess it also really depends again on, I think especially if, for example, maybe there's still people who are still processing that sense of loss and grief. I know, because I've been able to interview a couple or some because of my research right now. And I know that it can be overwhelming as well. So I don't think it would be easy to just like, okay, I'm going to extend myself for someone else at the moment, because right now I just really need to focus on what's going on internally or mentally or anything like that. So yeah, so I've seen, I guess, in that way, both ways, where I guess once they're able to find that sense of relatability, they can extend like, okay, I can help. I can be that welcoming to welcome that stranger. But there's also periods where perhaps if you're in that place, right, where I need to think like, okay, emotionally right now, I'm not in a good place. Mentally right now, I'm not in a good place. And so it's a little bit more challenging. Not that they can't. Through my interviews, they still are able to. And I think just generally here in the Philippines, one of the characteristics, that have been part of culture is really like that sense of hospitality, that sense of just like welcoming to people. But it would still take, some effort as well. And especially if you're going through something emotional or mental at the moment. So I hope that kind of answered that a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm also curious, Nabi, your thoughts on that question.
Could you repeat the question so that I could?
Just
I lost in her words.
in your experience with the third culture kid experience, has that ethic of welcoming the stranger manifest itself in you in some way?
Yeah, definitely. I think in rooms that I'm in, I think what Karen has mentioned, kind of who I am is more, I kind of keep to myself because I'm still reading the room. It's different when I'm in the Philippines, when I'm in Saipan, and when I've moved here in America. I moved in 2017, and it was such a adjustment for me because there is diversity, but it's in a diversified level that I didn't really experience. And so I was like, oh, okay, and so when in rooms that I'm in, when someone says like, oh, I just moved here, I'm a child of immigrants, I kind of have this like invisible connection that I relate to you, and I kind of um 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 yeah, like I feel a little bit of safety in a way that, like, oh, I could go to this person and approach them because we have something in common. Sometimes I do feel a little bit isolated in rooms that I don't relate to. In Antioch, a lot of my classmates in the past, now there is a little bit more diversity. Sometimes I would be the only person of color, or there would be a couple of us. And so I would kind of more relate to the person of color in the room rather than the others. So I would feel so lost. And to have that experience, kind of when in a school context, which I'm mostly in, I would reach out to the person, be like, if you need resources, if you need someone to talk to, let me know. But if it would be someone I don't relate to, I don't really, because I don't know how to even start, because we have, in a way, nothing in common. But if there's that small bit, I'm kind of more inclined to reach out to make space, because I kind of know how it's like. I'm not sure if that was clear enough, but that's how I would have, that's how I interpret the question, and that's how I answered it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're 5 minutes before the end of the hour, and I was curious about the support. What support exists for third culture kids, and what's already there, and what would be helpful to have in the future that are not existing yet?
Yeah, so well, the good thing is there are, yeah, if you Google, if you check it out, even in Instagram, there's a lot of groups now that are kind of like really like, oh, TCK or CCK. And so definitely if you're in your own community or wherever they may be, you can definitely Google support groups. And if you just need, other people around who can really give you as well as not just give guidance, but at the same time, like supplement, teach learnings or books or just any stories. There's so many stories. There's so many stories out there about that have similar, even though, like I said, like maybe not a lot of people will coin the term TCK or CCK. This, of course, has really been around for a long time. And so it's definitely good to just check out resources, read on some books and similar stories, movies, of course. I mean, as a film student, like it's very helpful to be able to see like, okay, but that's where there's also, to answer your question, that's also where there's sometimes lack as well, at least depending on your culture. But at least for us, like, although, like I said, I realize now that I'm going further in my studies now, I realize that there are a lot of elements of the experience of third culture and cross-cultural in our films. Of course, one of the things that I realized though now, I guess, is really being able to add to the dimension of being able to come into that, at least in a scholarly level. And so even for my professors and for my advisors, that when I was presenting this concept and everything, they were very much interested to see like, okay, so this is a very interesting take coming from that aspect of recognizing the need for films. And even for those, for example, like the realization that you can tell your story, like I think like that's such a powerful way of really being able to connect to people. And so I think one of the ways to support is just tell the story. Yeah, like whoever you come across, wherever you are, you have a story to tell. And I think like in many ways it can really just be very empowering. So yeah, hopefully those are some of the things that could help.
Thank you
And
for
I like that. I saw Sarah's link. So thank you for that.
I will definitely check it out, and it'll be also included in the LibGuide so that people could come back to the link if you'd like to check out these resources and some of the things that were mentioned here. And we're about to hit the hour mark, and so for those of you who would need to leave at the hour, feel free to do so. We could stay here for a few more minutes to talk to Karen a little bit more, get to know her. If you have any questions, we can translate to that. So I just wanted to recognize the time. And let me look at the chat. It looks like there's a few. Go ahead.
Just real quickly, remember to support the Student Success Symposium. Register for that and attend as you can, and come back next Monday for a great conversation with one of our alums about telling stories and social justice. It's really going to be great. And bring some friends.
Yes. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for coming. And I see there's a few comments here for Karen and I, and thank you all. And
Guys, thank you, everyone.
yeah, definitely. Let's make sure we give a moment. Yeah. I had one last question. I was curious, what can you share to parents of third culture kids? You know, I'm sure parents also are having their own journeys and their experiences. So they're also dealing with their own and then also taking care of their kids who is also experiencing their own stuff. So I was curious what you could insight that you could share about that.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, the whole intergenerational aspect is another layer. Especially because most of the the parents, of course, they're either immigrants or they're also because of their work or military or anything, they have to move from place to place. So yeah, there's definitely that aspect. I guess for me, the main thing I could say for both sides is really just to have that messy conversation. I love that. I guess it's just to allow yourself to have a messy conversation with one another. And I know sometimes it's hard, especially with especially like when there's so many layers, and it also depends on the family and the parents and how open, and the kids as well, and the upbringing. So I know there's a lot of like layers to that, but I think that if the parents, especially since we're talking specifically about parents, if they can really just open that up, you know, like have just a, even just saying like, hey, how have you been processing you know, the move, or how have you been processing life lately when it comes to, you know, your situation. And I think just being able to not just ask the question, but take time to listen and just be that bridge, you know, be that bridge as well to process together. And I think also being open for the parents to also be open about what they're feeling, so that the children can also get a glimpse of their life and recognize that, oh yeah, like they are also dealing with things on their end. And so yeah, it might be messy. I love this whole thing, but I think that it is definitely necessary. And I think like we really need to open up the conversations more and just have that place of understanding with one another, you know, or even if you can't, I think the main goal is like just be able to listen and really be able to say like, okay, even though I may not understand at the moment, or maybe there's a lot of emotional things going on at the moment, but I think just the fact that there's a movement towards wanting to connect would really be a big difference. So yeah.
That's beautifully said. Thank you so much. And so if anybody else have any questions or any insight that they'd like to share, feel free to unmute yourselves or put it in the comment. So
Yeah, I would just want to say, Karen, do you think that through this engagement or ongoing engagement, there's more attention being paid to maybe cross-cultural differences or lived experiences that can help? Have you found that through your studies, maybe?
That there's a
third
lot of
culture?
that there's a lot of attention now for lived experiences. I think yes. I think I would agree. Of course, there could always be more, you know, and there could always be more. There could always be added literature, like added things to add to it. But and like I said, the concept of TCK itself is fairly new. So even just on my own research, and when I was interviewing a lot of the Filipino TCKs, because that's the specific place I had to interview, not many knew the concept. So it's still, there's still definitely a need to broaden the perspective. And even though this term has been there, like I said, because of the constant change of society and the way that mixed culture is really progressing, even that concept in itself, they had to expand and continue to expand. So there's definitely need for that, to expand it, to definitely add to what's already there. So that way, yeah, it could really there could really be that place of people, different experiences, and different attachments or lived moments that they could add to that. So
Mhm.
Yeah, the more the better.
Mhm.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Karen, outside of language, what has been your biggest challenge when you've had to relocate?
Outside of language, I think it would also be perspective, and yeah, maybe perspective. I would say that. Not to say that the others don't have a perspective or something, but I think just we coming from different perspectives there. I guess because I came from a different perspective and experience, and then others have come from that as well. I think that finding that common space, or finding the space to really be able to communicate and to understand each other, not just language wise, but really being able to come to that level of connection. Yeah, that's definitely been a challenge sometimes. And to recognize, like, okay, like their lived experience is different, and so is mine. So yeah, definitely, I would say that's definitely one of the other challenges I faced.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thanks, Clarence.
Mhm. I was curious, Karen, about, where could we find you so that we could follow through like the projects that you'll be coming up with to help bridge the gap for cross-cultural kids. And I would love to, utilize your what you come up with and share that to folks that I come across, and I'm sure others would love to do that. So feel free to.
Yeah, okay. Well, I probably would have to make a separate thing on that. But I am like, I'm hoping to finish I'm hoping to defend in the coming months. So once I'm done with that, I really love to have an even more specific space, I guess. But you can definitely follow me on Facebook, Karen Rey, or on Instagram, Myrtle Karen Rey. I think you might have to type I might have to type that out.
I will go ahead
But
and put that
yeah,
in
you
there.
could probably do that. Yeah. But yeah, I'd love to stay connected in any way, and hopefully we could really be able to all come together and share our own experiences. But yeah, and hopefully I can, one my remaining goals is really to be able to put this into not just writing, but even into film. Hopefully we can have more of that. So that's my long-term goals.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Thank
thank you
you,
so
Nabby.
much for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Thank you. Thank you also
Yes,
to
yes.
everybody.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you
all.
so much.
Thank
Yeah. Thank you.
When I was reading a little bit of the research by some folks who identified as having this experience, it was saying that that amongst a larger group of people who have called themselves third culture kids, that they are perhaps more tolerant of difference, and also multilingual,
Mhm.
and then also have relationships cross-culturally, of course, as you mentioned. And I'm thinking these are amazing qualities for researchers.
Mm.
So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what you're doing, and how it
Thank you.
could be useful for our students.
Yeah,
All
you can
right.
come back and visit us again afterwards.
Yeah, I'd love to stay in touch, and once I'm done with this and everything, yeah, I would love to share what I've been able to come across. But that's very true. That's very true. With what you were saying, Sarah, I 100% agree.
And I assume that you're doing something qualitative, because that's how we're going to get to those stories and
Yes.
So it seems to me like this is a really strong case. Your
Hmm.
work and other is a really strong case for just valuing qualitative research as we need to continue to do and expand our thinking about that. But this is a really beautiful bridge.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, it's really been rewarding to really hear so many other stories and to recognize like, wow, a lot of these things have to get out. And I mean, of course, not just even for the Filipinos, but for so many different ethnicities and backgrounds and experiences. And not everybody has had, like, even in my own interviews, not everyone has had great experiences. Like it's been challenging. It has also really been extra challenging. So I think for them being able to also open up about that and share, the challenges to it really makes a difference. So yeah.
Your work is making a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very beautiful. Thank you so much, Karen, for coming in here and speaking with us and sharing your insight and your personal and your research background. It's really beautiful, and to have this defined and expanded conversation for others to hear and relate to. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for coming. So, thank you.
Take care, everyone.
I'll stop the recording.